Hello everyone, my name is Luke, aka Mr. Rage, and welcome to another one of my gaming discussion videos. I hope you guys are somehow doing well. It is a fine summer night, the US economy is in shambles, Joe Biden is out sniffing people, and I kind of look like Carlos from Resident Evil 3. So yeah, I hope you guys are at least doing well. The first thing that I want to say is a quick thank you to all of my new subscribers. We have finally reached 950 subs on YouTube, and I just want to say, like, to all my new subscribers, thank you guys so very much. The fact that you guys appreciate me and my content to the point where you actually subscribe to my channel and like some of my videos and commented, like, thank you guys so much. Like, I have so much gratitude for all of you guys, and I really greatly appreciate all of you so much for helping me reach my goals on YouTube. You guys are the best that a guy like me could have ever asked for. It's because of you guys that I am actually getting somewhere on this platform. And the competition is so high because I'm still a pretty small, unrecognized YouTuber, but because of you guys, I'm actually kind of rising up. So thank you guys so much. Like, although it may be a small thing for you guys, for me, it's a big thing because you guys are helping me accomplish my first ever life goal of getting somewhere on one of my most favorite platforms of all time. Because obviously, as bad as YouTube has gotten, this is still my platform. I still love YouTube. My life would change for the worse if something ever happened to YouTube. So thank you guys. Just thank you guys so very much. It really means a lot. But anyways, time to get to main discussion of tonight's discussion video. Resident Evil 5 Remake. Yeah, this is my second time talking about this game. If you guys can remember my first time talking about it, where I was a lot more angrier. Now I'm calm, but Resident Evil 5 Remake is happening. Although it has not been officially confirmed, Capcom kind of gave us a lot of hints at the end of Separate Ways that it's happening. At some point, Resident Evil 5 Remake is definitely happening. Whether we get Code Veronica first or Resident Evil 1, at some point in the future, we are getting Resident Evil 5. Especially since Capcom basically confirmed that they are remaking a bunch of the older Resident Evil games. So yeah, at this point, Resident Evil 5 is most definitely coming out. Like, we have definitely got enough hints to say that, yes, it is coming out at some point. And I gotta say, man, like, I'm excited. Like, the Resident Evil series is doing so good. I'm excited for the whole future of this franchise. We're getting Resident Evil 9 possibly next year. We're getting remakes of the original games. Like, us Resident Evil fans, we're eating good. And shout out to the OGs, like to the OG Resident Evil fans. Unless you're one of those fans who think that Resident Evil 4 Remake was not as good as the original Resident Evil 4. If you're one of those people, then yeah, you can go fuck off. But for all my OG Resident Evil fans, we're eating good, okay? This franchise is doing great. Like, we've got so much good shit coming our way. We got Resident Evil 9. We got remakes coming for Code Veronica, Resident Evil 5, and maybe even Resident Evil 1 at one point. Like, I don't know, because Capcom said they're doing a bunch of remakes in the future. So this is really cool. Like, I'm actually really excited for this whole franchise. But when it comes to Resident Evil 5, the first thing that they really need to do is they need to get rid of all the black zombies, because, you know, killing black zombies is racist. Like, sure, we can kill white zombies, we can kill Mexican zombies, because fuck us Mexican people, right? We can kill fucking Mexican zombies, we can kill Asian zombies, but no, if you kill black zombies, man, that's so racist. Black Lives Matter, right, Matt Purslow? Matt Purslow, like that dude, huge shout out to Matt Purslow. Probably one of my favorite British buffoons from IGN. Like, Matt Purslow, that was such a great video from both you and IGN. Like, 2 thumbs up for you guys. 2 thumbs up. So, yeah, massive shout out to Matt Purslow. And obviously, I'm fucking joking. Anyone who thinks that Resident Evil 5 is racist is one of the most pathetic fucking buffoons I have ever seen. Anyone who agrees with Matt Purslow and Matt Purslow himself are fucking buffoons. Obviously, the game is not racist just for killing fucking zombies that are black. God, the way people think these days. Anyways, obviously that's a joke. Capcom doesn't need to change a single thing about that. All that shit can stay. We killed black people when the first original game came out. We're gonna kill black people again in Resident Evil 5. Just like how we killed Mexicans in the original RE4, and we killed Mexicans again in RE4 Remake, okay? Now that's actually racist. Saying that it's racist to kill black zombies, but not saying a single thing about killing Mexican zombies, now that's actually racist. Anyways, try not to get woke and political here, but anyways, let's talk about what I would like to see in the Resident Evil 5 remake, shall we? The first thing that Capcom actually does need to focus on is they do need to change a lot of things about the game. Because the thing about Resident Evil 5 is Resident Evil 5 was not that good of a game. Sure, it was a fantastic co-op game, but as a Resident Evil game, it really wasn't that good. You see, the reason why Resident Evil 4 was such a revolutionary game in the survival horror genre is because Capcom and Shinji Mikami took two genres that did not fit well together and made them actually feel like they were meant to be together: action and horror. This man, Shinji, took two of those genres and mixed them up and made them feel like a better combination than peanut butter and jelly. Horror and action being together, most horror fans back in that era would look at you and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That would never work. But Capcom and Shinji took horror and action, combined them, and made an amazing game that not only was revolutionary for its time, but it influenced not only the horror genre, but the entire video game industry with its third-person, over-the-shoulder view. So, yeah, Resident Evil 4 was probably one of the most revolutionary games of all time. Although I was upset that Resident Evil 4 brought so much action into the series, I'm now starting to realize that this is not Silent Hill, this is not Outlast, this is Resident Evil. If it's Resident Evil, there needs to be a little bit of action, because this is the franchise that literally took action and horror and combined them successfully to make a new genre out of two old ones. Because of Resident Evil 4, we now have the action horror genre, a new genre that was created using two previous genres and were then put together by Shinji Mikami and Capcom. So Resident Evil 4, the reason why Resident Evil 4 was such a successful game is because it still had its horror elements while adding action that made the game more fun and more entertaining, while still keeping those old horror elements that older fans still loved about the Resident Evil franchise. Now, why is it that Resident Evil 5 failed to do this? Well, the reason why is because Capcom went a little too far with the action. Remember, Resident Evil 4 had a fine combination of action and horror. Both these elements were finely tuned out and balanced to make a great experience. However, with Resident Evil 5, yeah, way too much action, way too much. At this point, the action was like all the way up here, while the horror was all the way over here. Just really small amounts of horror. So that's why Resident Evil 5 was kind of a bad game. With Resident Evil 4 and even Resident Evil 3, like if for anyone who played the original PS1 Resident Evil 3, even Resident Evil 3 had a fair amount of action. But the reason why these Resident Evil games were successful while still keeping those action elements is because it was balanced. You had a fine balance of action and horror. But then Capcom went way too fucking crazy and boosted the action all the way up here. Like, that's why Resident Evil 5 was a bad game. It was a fun action game, especially because of the co-op, but when you change a horror franchise into a straight-up action franchise, you're gonna piss off a lot of people, because this is a franchise within a certain genre, that being the horror genre. So when you change that horror franchise into something different, that's obviously going to be a problem. A horror franchise is going to attract horror fans, and that's where the success for a franchise will come from. If you change all of that and go into a completely different genre, then you're basically saying fuck you to the old fans and trying to attract different people for a different genre. Resident Evil is not supposed to be a straight up action franchise. It's supposed to be horror and action. So for the Resident Evil 5 remake, what Capcom needs to do is they're going to basically need to redesign the whole game. Because with Resident Evil 4 remake, they didn't need to change a lot. They had the concept of Resident Evil 4. All they had to do was just remake that concept while improving on a couple small things, like the story, the characters, and some of the gameplay. But with Resident Evil 5, they're going to have to redesign the whole game. They're going to have to do a lot of going all the way back to the drawing board, and they're going to have to restart. Because, yeah, Resident Evil 5 was not a good game. It was not a good Resident Evil game. Even the story was kind of trash. Like, people love Albert Wesker. So do I. Like, Wesker was probably the best part about Resident Evil 5, but they need to make Wesker a more sinister threat in Resident Evil 5 Remake. They need to show how actually terrifying this man is. This world-ending threat that Wesker was trying to accomplish with his goal. I'm not going to spoil the story for Resident Evil 5 because although the story is kind of crappy, it's still a decent story. But what I'm saying is they need to make Resident Evil 5 scarier. They need to add more darker horror elements. Some more gore, obviously, as well. The gameplay is going to need a massive improvement because the gameplay for the original Resident Evil 5, I mean, it's alright. I mean, for a Resident Evil game, it's fine, but for Resident Evil 5, they need to redesign the actual game. It's going to be like making a whole new game, basically, because Capcom cannot remake Resident Evil 5 using the same foundation for the original Resident Evil 5, or else it's not going to be good. It will be an action game. It will be just a straight-up co-op action game with slight horror elements. And look, with the Resident Evil 4 remake, as well as Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil Village, and the two Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, all these games were survival horror. So if Capcom goes back to making action Resident Evil games, that's going to piss off the fans that came back to this franchise, as well as the new fans, because this franchise went back to being a survival horror action franchise. If you go back to straight up action, you're going to screw up. So for Resident Evil 5, the game needs to be scarier. They need to add more survival horror elements and more horror elements in general. Make the game darker, make the game more intense, make the game scarier, add more actual survival horror elements instead of just feel like a Call of Duty game, because that's what Resident Evil 5 felt like. It felt like a third-person Call of Duty because of how much action there was in there. I'm not saying that they should get rid of all the action, because the action is good, but tone it down. Make it an actual horror game instead of a horror wannabe. Because Resident Evil 5 is not a horror game. It is an action co-op game with ever so slight horror elements. Resident Evil 5 needs to be a dark survival horror game just like the other Resident Evil games. And Capcom can still keep all the action, just tone it down. All that action can still stay. The action is what made the game fun and entertaining, but the horror is what makes it intense, heart-pounding, and even more entertaining, because people love horror. That's why we're horror fans. Horror is what entertains us. We like the way horror makes us feel. Scared, threatened, vulnerable, tension-filled. That entertains us. And when you have action to keep the fun and horror to keep the entertainment, that's what made Resident Evil 4 such an incredible game. An incredible Resident Evil game. That's what Capcom needs to do for Resident Evil 5. Make the game a horror action game. Not just a straight up action game with only slight horror elements, because that's basically a fuck you to every single fan of this franchise that actually liked it because it was a horror franchise. I don't mind the action. I don't. But I need my horror elements back. I need it to be balanced. Give us our horror back for Resident Evil 5, but the action can stay. Now, as I said, this is going to be extremely hard for Capcom because they're going to have to redo the whole game. They're going to have to redo segments. They're going to have to rewrite the story, possibly. rewrite the gameplay elements. They're gonna have to redesign the gameplay. It's going to be hard. It's going to be like making a whole new Resident Evil game, but it's worth it. It's worth it to make a whole new game because that's the point of a remake. A remake is supposed to be better than the original game that it is based off of. So obviously this should not be a problem for Capcom, you know, to remake the whole game. But I think it's worth it. And now the next thing I want to talk about is the co-op. The co-op will be a great thing as well. As a matter of fact, if the Resident Evil 5 remake can actually succeed in keeping a balance between horror and action, Resident Evil 5 Remake might just be one of the best modern co-op horror games of all time. But like I said, Capcom has to go all the way back to the drawing board to actually make Resident Evil 5 Remake a successful Resident Evil game. If the action is going to stay, it will be a good action game, sure. But as a Resident Evil game, it's going to fail in the eyes of many Resident Evil fans, including myself. I'll still play it, sure, but I ain't gonna play it like it's a Resident Evil game, that's for sure. I am expecting survival horror action, horror elements, puzzles, exploration, cool guns and weapons, and a great progression system, because obviously that's also a part of Resident Evil. Making progress, discovering new weapons, that satisfaction of unlocking an area that you couldn't unlock before. They need to make Resident Evil 5 more like the original Resident Evil games, and they can keep that action. I can't stress that enough. I don't want them to make just a full-on horror game, like a full-on horror game. Like they can keep those elements of the action, but make it like Resident Evil 4. Take what you did with Resident Evil 4 and do it again, but do it better with a different game. A game that could be better. Because of course Resident Evil 5 could be better than Resident Evil 4 if they make it. I mean, hell, this may be a hot take, but I thought Resident Evil Village was better than Resident Evil 4 in my opinion. And that was just because of the lichens, like the enemies that you fight. But for Resident Evil 5, make it more like Resident Evil 4, right? Make it more like Resident Evil 4. Bring in that fine balance of action and horror, and you will have another great Resident Evil game on your hands, Capcom. And the gameplay, like redesign the gameplay as well. Make the gameplay more intense. Like, don't make it seem like Chris Redfield is like this unstoppable super soldier. Like, make it actually scary. Make it intense. Like, instead of the combat just being like a fucking Call of Duty game, make the gameplay intense, like how a survival horror game is supposed to be. But it can still have that action. It could be an intense action game, not just a straight up action game where you feel like this badass soldier just killing everybody. No, that's not what a horror game is supposed to make you feel like. It's supposed to feel like a fight for survival, an intense fight for survival that still retains those fun, heart-pounding action moments. That's what we need for a Resident Evil 5 remake. Make the game darker, scarier, and more intense. That is all I'm asking for. And the co-op will just make it better. I mean, imagine playing this intense survival horror game with a friend. Both of you guys just screaming together and having fun together because of how scary and how fun the game is. Because a horror game that's also fun at the same time because of the heart-pounding action and intensity, that's what makes a great survival horror game. Survival horror games are supposed to have a little bit of action. I mean, that's fine. And even a little bit more action than what's normal is also okay. You know, Resident Evil 4 had that. Resident Evil 4 had plenty of action, but not so much to distract people from the horror that was still in it. We need a fine balance of horror elements and action elements. That's what will make a greater Resident Evil 5. And yeah, obviously, you know, make other improvements as well. You know, you could make some other improvements if Capcom wishes to do so, which I'm sure they were. You know, I'm sure they're definitely going to make other improvements besides just making the game scarier, hopefully, and improving the gameplay and the co-op feature. Next thing they can do is remake the story, kind of, like maybe do a rewrite of the story a little bit. Story for Resident Evil 5 was a bit wonky, a bit cheesy, you know, a bit too campy in my opinion, but it's fine. You know, Resident Evil's always been kind of campy, so it's fine. I'm excited to see Wesker again. You know, I'm very excited to see Wesker again. I loved his voice actor in separate ways. Kind of wish they would have got the same guy who voiced Wesker in Dead by Daylight, but it is what it is. So, yeah, this is my wish list for Resident Evil 5. I want the game scarier. I want the story to be a bit more serious, a bit more sinister, you know, a bit less campy if they can, because they've done that with Resident Evil 4. The original Resident Evil 4 had a lot of campiness, and I mean a whole lot of campiness. But for Resident Evil 4 Remake, they made it a bit more serious, a bit darker, and a bit more sinister. So for Resident Evil 5 Remake, again, like I said before, make it more like Resident Evil 4. Everything you do at Resident Evil 4, do the same thing with the Resident Evil 5 Remake. Okay? That's all I ask. So, yeah. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this video. Let me know what you think about Resident Evil 5 Remake. If you guys stuck by all the way till the end, whole 20 minutes. If you are still here right at this moment, thank you so very much for hearing me ramble about this. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think about Resident Evil 5 Remake, and what do you want to see in it? Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Luke, aka Mr. Rage. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. And yeah, I cannot wait to be your guys' host for the next couple of discussion videos coming very soon in the future, as well as some more live streams. So, yeah. Anyways, thank you guys so very much. I love you guys, and I will see you guys in the next discussion video, next gameplay video, whatever it may be. So, yeah. Take care, y'all. Peace out.